Welcome to Berkshire Now, where we explore news and views from around the Berkshires. There has been a number of Black Lives Matter protests around Berkshire County since the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis on May 25th. In Williamstown, a large group gathered at the intersection of Routes 7 and 2, a well-known and popular location for such demonstrations. In Dalton, a small group at the intersection of Main Street and South Street gathered to voice their frustration. Pittsfield had a gathering of several hundred on May 30th and was covered extensively by us. Perhaps the largest gathering ever in Berkshire County was in Great Barrington on June 6th, with more than 1,000 protesters. Some kneeled for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, the same amount of time it took Officer Chauvin to kill Big Floyd by kneeling on his neck. Dennis Powell, president of the Berkshire County NAACP, said, "To put your knee on a man's neck until he is dead is the same as putting a rope around the neck until he was dead." Here we are in 2020, back to lynching, a different kind of lynching. Berkshire District Attorney Andrea Harrington said, "To see the prosecutors in these cases refuse to bring appropriate charges until there was intense pressure put upon them. As a prosecutor, that sickens me." In new developments in the murder of George Floyd, it now appears that Officer Chauvin and Floyd worked together at the same Minneapolis nightclub, El Nuevo Laredo. A worker at the club, David Penny, said that not only did they know each other, but they had a history. This might lead into an investigation as to whether Chauvin held a grudge against Floyd, and if so, we might see the charge of second-degree murder upgraded to first-degree murder. George Floyd's brother, Philanese, told House lawmakers on Wednesday that his brother didn't deserve to die over $20, asking them, "Is that what a black man's worth? $20? This is 2020. Enough is enough." These are just a few of the many protests being staged around our country. In Minneapolis, the protests are almost a daily occurrence. Early on, the protests were violent, but of late, they have become more or less peaceful. Protesters in Washington, D.C. in front of the White House resulted in the mayor of D.C., Muriel Bowser, renaming a section of the street across from the White House Black Lives Matter Plaza, a pronouncement that came more than a week later after the protests in the Capitol. D.C. workers painted a message in giant yellow letters on a busy street ahead of a planned protest. The sign reads, "Black Lives Matter." The massive banner-like project spans 2 blocks of 16th Street, a street that leads directly to the White House. The yellow letters span the width of the 2-lane street, creating an unmistakable image anyone within a few blocks could see. From Los Angeles to Boston, from Seattle to Miami, and every city, town, and village in between, protesters across our nation have brought more public awareness of the problem than ever before in recent memory. It hasn't been since the 60s and 70s that we've seen such passion demonstrated by so many diverse people. And here is what is interesting about this. Young people, not just the old guard, are taking up the banner. This bodes well for the longevity of this movement. More and more young people are organizing Black Lives Matter protests. We are fortunate to have the opportunity to talk with one such young organizer. Our guest today is Calista Nelson, who is 17 years old and has just finished her junior year in high school. Calista, along with her friend Langston Staler, who is 18, organized a protest Black Lives Matter event on the steps of a place made famous in Great Barrington by native son W.E.B. Du Bois, a civil rights activist from the early 1900s. Thank you, Calista, for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Our viewers would like to know, you're a fairly young woman that is getting involved in this. How old are you?
I'm 17.
17. and you organized a huge event in Great Barrington. Can you tell us how you did that?
Well, my mother works with the town, so not only was I using social media, which of course I have a fairly large following, so I was posting stuff on there. I had friends post and carry out the word. My mother used her following to send out a bunch of emails to a bunch of her people, friends who work in the town. And it just picked up really fast. Everyone was talking about it by like day 3.
Wow. And that's it, just through social media
Hmm.
and a few phone calls.
Pretty much. Oh, and my friend Langston Stoller and I, she's 18, we got together and we got some sidewalk chalk and we wrote on the streets of Great Barrington, protest June 6th at 12 o'clock. We forgot to add the location though, which was definitely something to save for next time. But
Well, speaking of next time, are there some next times in the works?
to be determined. I've been talking to some people. I've had some people reach out to me. Um, I definitely don't think it should only be a one-time thing. I mean, this issue is continuous and ongoing. We can't stand up once and then sit back down. That's not how it's going to work. So there might be a next time.
In Great Barrington or elsewhere?
I don't know yet. I would like to do another one in Great Barrington, but I would also like to get broader.
Okay, good. Now, how did you first get interested in this kind of activity?
I like using my voice. It's always been something I've been good at, speaking up when no one else really is. I think that I have a lot of privilege where I live. I'm a white female who lives in the Berkshires, and I think that that's something I should really take more advantage of to help people who maybe aren't as fortunate as I am.
Do you have any heroes from the local area, such as Dubois?
Um, I don't think so. I've of course read his work, and I've done projects on him and a bunch of other mostly female activists and scientists. I'm not that into politics actually, but this is making me a little bit. This what's happening in our country is definitely spiking my interest.
Yeah, a lot of stuff is happening in our country, isn't it?
It is.
What do you think of what's happening in Seattle?
I actually don't know what's happening in Seattle.
A bunch of protesters have taken over, I think it's about a 6 block area, and have thrown out the police. And they actually have armed guards there that are not the police, uh, their own militia, I guess. They've taken over an abandoned police station, and actually, there's a rapper that has kind of made himself king and is taking over this group of protesters. It's kind of a strange thing going on in Seattle.
I think that is strange, but I think that no change happens unless something big like that spikes it. I think that, I mean, we're not going to get anywhere if people continue to follow the rules and what we have in place. That's not how things change. Um, so props to them.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic, isn't it?
It is definitely.
And by contrast, the protest in Great Barrington was completely peaceful.
Hmm. That was something
And,
that was very important to me.
yes, yes. But how do you ensure that?
I talked to Chief Walsh with my mother and my father, and I was very clear. And I sent him a follow-up email as well, saying that I wanted the protest to remain peaceful. It was very, very important. Um, of course, walking into it knowing what is going on everywhere else, with rubber bullets and tear gas, and it's horrible. But that's something that I didn't want to happen to Great Barrington. I love Great Barrington. I love the little town. I don't want anything bad to come to it. Um, so I tried to make it explicitly clear, even in the advertisements, that it was very peaceful.
And there's rumors around that there are some extreme activists that are infiltrating little towns and villages that have these kinds of protests, specifically to create violence and mayhem. Um, so if that had happened during your protest, how would that have been handled? Would the police readily available? Would they have stepped in, do you think?
I think they would have stepped in. Um, I did get some people sending me messages saying that people were going to come and cause a lot of chaos and stuff, which freaked me out. So I had
Oh,
another
yeah.
conversation with the chief of police, and he said that he hasn't heard anything, but they would be on standby if something happened. And yet again, I stated that it needed to remain peaceful.
Yes. So apparently, Atifa didn't raise its ugly head.
Apparently not, no.
Good, good. Um, what do you see for the future for you? We talked a little about earlier about you perhaps doing another protest, um, most likely in Great Barrington, but um, other protests, other places, or even going to college. I assume you're probably a senior in high school now.
I'm going into my senior year, yeah.
You are, okay. Any plans for college?
I'm looking into colleges. I'm definitely planning on going to college right after high school. I don't know where, I don't know what I want to major in, but I know that that's what I want to do.
The where may be your bedroom with a laptop.
Maybe. I hope not. Maybe.
It's interesting. The University of Phoenix in Phoenix, Arizona, has been doing online learning for decades. Well, maybe not
Yeah.
decades, but yeah.
I didn't know
Um,
that. That's really cool.
yeah, they actually started out with no classrooms at all, as I understand it, and it
Wow.
was all remote learning.
Wow, I did not know that. Thank you.
Yeah, and of course, more and more colleges have, especially now, have jumped on that bandwagon
Mhm.
out of necessity
Yeah,
because they may not survive if they can't have students there.
yeah.
Would you be prepared to take college classes online?
I wouldn't like it, but yes, I would be prepared to do it.
Yeah, there's a certain experience that you get from being on campus and
Yeah.
living there with others and
Mhm.
being away from home and learning what the world is all about.
Exactly, and I
But,
really look forward to that experience if I can have it.
but no idea what major you might want to go into.
No, I've thought about a couple different possibilities, things that I'm interested in, but nothing confirmed.
Where do you see Black Lives Matter organizations, not the organizations, Black Lives Matter movement going from here? You see it living a long time?
It's been going on a long time. I don't see it ending anytime soon because I don't see I mean, I think it's something that needs to remain very, very, like, prominent in our communities and in our country. It's something that is very important to not only me, but a lot of people. Um, I think the movement is something that's gonna, of course, go down in history. I think it has been for a while and it's been ignored. And I really think that that's gonna change.
I think so too. There's something different about this movement, isn't there?
Yes,
Or
and
at this point in the movement, I should
mhm.
say.
What something that really stuck out to me was in Dennis Powell's speech at the Great Barrington protest. He said that this one was different because they have white people fighting with them this time, and that's what's making it so different. Is that it's everyone's involved in it instead of just the victims.
And it's a shame that a person gave his life,
Mm,
not knowing what was going to be the result of it, but he gave his life. That and the aftermath of that is that this movement gained many more legs than it had before, and
yeah,
there's so much momentum with it now. I don't remember anything like this since the 60s and 70s when all the protests were happening back then. And I really think this one is going to be different.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
George Floyd's life was taken from him. He didn't give anything, it was taken from him, which is why I think so many people are so angry because it was taken from him. You know, he had a daughter, he had like a family back home, he had a whole life that he like got totally uprooted
For $20.
for $20 exactly.
Yeah. Sad. Um, your cohorts at school, your friends at school, what do they think of your activities?
They're very proud of me. I have
Uh,
very supportive friends. I love my friends. Um, they were all at the protest. I got lots of hugs, lots of fist bumps. I don't think they're surprised that I would do something like this, but I know that they're proud.
and I would imagine your parents are extremely proud as well.
I think they are, yeah.
Well, Calista, my hat's off to you. I think you've done a wonderful job with with organizing that event, and I'm so happy to have had this chance to meet with you. And I
Thank you.
wish you well in the future. Thank you so much for being here.
Of course, thank you for having me so much, Bruce.
Take care.
Thank you, you too.
As Calista and I just mentioned, the Black Lives Matter movement has taken on a positive change in momentum. Something is different. More white people are participating in the protest. Corporate America is also realizing that they need to help bring about change. For example, Apple is putting $100 million into racial equality efforts and pledging to do better in hiring and buying from Black-owned businesses. Facebook has promised $10 million to groups working on racial injustice. Alphabet, the parent company of Google, is giving $12 million to social causes addressing racial inequality. Other companies participating in one form or another are Coke, Pepsi, Uber, Uber Eats, Spanx, McDonald's, Nike, Berkshire Bank, Amazon, Netflix, and many others. Things are changing in other areas as well. Pittsfield Police have begun to reevaluate its use of force policy, as are thousands of other police departments. Congress is looking hard at how to develop new legislation to better address the inequality that has existed in our country since it was first formed. It would be nice to see some real change, wouldn't it? Until next time, please stay safe and be strong.